30 to 40% of cloud spending is considered waste. Okay, waste, and so that's either maybe inefficient usage or trying to take an old monolithic application and running into public cloud, which doesn't really work, or people just overrunning. But if you think about that, worldwide public cloud spending for 2024 was $600 billion. And if we're saying 30 to 40% of that is waste, that's $180 to $240 billion that were maybe put in the wrong place. And so that's where I think repatriation is going to go and clean up, is that I'm not saying public cloud is wrong or bad, but that 30 to 40%, I mean, that's real money out there and that people are spending that it might just not be the best tool for them.
This is Sovereign DBaaS Decoded, a podcast for IT leaders and implementers looking to reliably scale database ops while maintaining control of their data stack. In each episode, we join industry experts to discuss the what and why of sovereignty and how you can implement the Sovereign DBaaS concept of your own using open source databases, deployment models, and tooling. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to 2025's third episode of Sovereign DBaaS Decoded. I'm Vinay Joosery, and this episode is brought to you by Severalnines. So today we'll talk about repatriation, the movement of workloads from public cloud back to on-premises or hybrid environments. To help us unpack the topic, today's guest, John White, COO at US Signal. Thanks for joining us, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, first thing first, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I've been in the infrastructure industry pretty much my whole life. Started a hosting company out of my bedroom when I was like 13 and just never really stopped. So I've done a few runs here. Just really enjoy building the foundation and plumbing that people need to run their applications. And so at US Signal, I jumped on board about 2 years ago now after they got purchased by Igneo Infrastructure Fund. So it was a single owner operator. And then we moved into a PE back, where I've really spent most of my life as being PE backed. And we've been really just on a tear the last 2 years since that acquisition occurrde. So as a daily, I'm COO, and that's kind of a broad title. But I have a great partnership with Dan Watts, the CEO, and the board. And I'm here to help build new products, help figure out where kind of the tech industry, where we need to kind of build and go from a tech industry. So I have engineering, delivery. So when we sell new customers, they roll up through me, as well as then support. So kind of the whole cradle to grave, from building the products to helping sell the products from a solution architecture team to engineering the products, delivery, and support of the products. So it's an awesome job. Believe it or not, I don't feel like I work much because this is exactly what I love to do. And we're having a lot of fun doing it. And it's crazy. For so many years, I told people I was in the data center industry. People had no idea what the heck I was talking about. But with some of the latest and greatest with AI, and then Trump getting up and talking about how much data centers are important to the United States, it's actually been pretty in vogue, which is kind of rare in the tech industry.
Yeah, excellent. Well, welcome. It was nice to meet you in Madrid.
Yeah, for sure.
At the Cloud Stack conference.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we met there.
Looking forward to Milan as well.
Yeah. So today we'll be talking about the building repatriation wave. We'll speculate a bit on the causes. We'll consider the specific challenges to organizations wanting to join it, and what the future of infrastructure environments look like, especially in the light of AI. So the past 10, 50 years, we could say, has all been about cloud. Market size, $330 billion. AWS, Azure, Google have about 65% market share. And last year, the cloud services market grew, 20%. So half of that growth was due to Gen AI. Now, interestingly, last year's Barclays CIO survey suggested that more than 80% of enterprises were planning repatriation of workloads back on-prem / private cloud, right? And this is similar to a 2023 IDC case study. Now, before getting into this on-prem versus public cloud, discussion. So, John, how do you conceptualize the space?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I think then it's very nuanced, and I think that's part of the reason why people are, saying repatriation will be a thing or won't be a thing. And so the way I look at it is we kind of have three buckets. We have virtualization, which is what enterprises have been doing for a long time. Some people labeled this cloud. Some people tried to make it a cloud thing or tried to call it a private cloud. And that's, we kind of all know that. So that's your Nutanix, your Hyper-V, your VMware running inside of the enterprise. And then the hosting companies, and even myself included in the past, have built offerings on those that are OpEx offerings that would be considered private cloud. So, virtualization, I consider more of like a CapEx based where, an enterprise is going and just buying a set of servers, they're operating, they're running them. And then you take that and move it into private cloud. That's usually by a hosting provider, somebody like me that's providing that as a service. And then public cloud has been noted as, your big, I guess I'd consider it maybe 4 or 5 now. Your AWS, your Azure, your GCP, your Oracle, your IBM. Those have been bigger, larger, hyperscale style projects that are a little bit different. And I think that's, really some of where we're a little bit nuanced in kind of what repatriation, means, because it's very kind of cloudy right now, to use for lack of a better words, as far as, what those actually workloads mean and what those means to specific companies.
Right. So is the pendulum in a way swinging back to, let's say on-prem, right? And was it only a matter of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is swinging back to on-prem, but I'm not sure that it's like that shocking to most people that have been in the industry. I mean, we as IT people and tech people always look for the tool to solve our problems, and public cloud was just one of those things. And people, viewed it as this nirvana place that, really it wasn't that. It was just a different way to build infrastructure and buy infrastructure. And that's it. And so, I think what we're seeing right now is just a right sizing of maybe of a misstep of like, we sent everything into a public cloud and realized that, that wasn't, really the best thing for our business. And to conceptualize that, I'm actually working on a white paper right now. So I have the stat handy, and I think we could all agree that, and we read in the media, but, depending on what analyst firm you look at, 30 to 40% of cloud spending is considered waste. Okay. Waste. And so that's either maybe inefficient usage or, trying to take an old monolithic application and running into public cloud, which doesn't really work, or people just overrunning. But if you think about that, worldwide public cloud spending for 2024 was $600 billion. And if we're saying 30 to 40% of that is waste, that's $180 to $240 billion that were maybe put in the wrong place. And so that's where I think repatriation is going to go and clean up, is that I'm not saying public cloud is wrong or bad, but that 30 to 40%, I mean, that's real money out there and that people are spending that it might just not be the best tool for them.
No, I mean, there are definitely expectations, and I think in a way, some of these expectations are unfulfilled, right? So let's go into, go a little bit deeper into that. So, when we talk about, you mentioned this nirvana, right? Huge expectations, lower costs, go to the cloud and you lower your cost. Why own when you can just rent, right? Improve security is another one. Improved SLAs, simplified ops, right? You don't want that mess in your backyard, just outsource it to somebody else, right? But is that the case? I mean, first of all, what leads people to believe that it's going to be less costly in the public cloud? Is it a matter of misjudging pricing?
Well, so I should have said this in my intro, but I did an infrastructure company for 16 years. Then I went and did a lot of consulting, and I spent a year at AWS. So I got to sit in the belly of the beast and kind of get perspective there. I think, we have to remember why public cloud was such a big thing in the beginning. And it wasn't really a technology solution as much as it was a business solution. Most of the time, and remember, it's weird we don't talk about it anymore, but shadow IT was the biggest reason why people were jumping to the public cloud, is they were sick of their departments saying, it's going to take you 2 months to get a server up and running. And somebody's like, that's stupid. I could swipe a credit card on AWS and my server's up and running in, a matter of minutes. Why do I need to wait? And so the business created a problem, on multiple fronts, even too. Think about it from the CFO perspective. How many times did, an IT person say, oh, we need 100 terabytes of storage, for the next 5 years, only to use 20 terabytes. And the CFO's like, what the heck? Why did we buy 5x the amount we needed? Well, we didn't know if we might need it one day. And so we did it. And so we solved those two core business problems with public cloud, which made a huge impact in the industry and allowed us to move faster. And heck, we had all these new startups come. But again, those were all business problems we solved. When you look back on those business problems, it's like, okay, yeah, we found that solution. But your solution on the technology side was a different SLA than you were used to, different hardware than you were used to, different operating model. The whole pets versus cattle is still lost on a lot of people. Them not realizing, hey, AWS and Azure was actually really built for this cattle thing, not pets. And so it was a completely different technology underneath, but the business people, got jaded with, where, oh man, we can move faster as a business. We could reduce our, capital expense. And that's really what the precipice of this whole thing started. And so I think really what we're seeing right now is just a cleanup of that. Is as a business now, we've learned how to deploy and, launch virtual machines in a matter of seconds. We've learned how to, clean up a lot of those challenges that we've had. We have all kinds of different operational models by Dell and Pure Storage and all those things, and you can build them on a private cloud on your premises. And that's the shift that we're seeing right this second.
Yeah. Another expectation is, that public cloud improves security, right? And data governance. The logic is, being a provider like AWS, you have all the money in the world, right? To hire the top security experts in the industry. So, but we all know that security is it's a shared responsibility, right? So you can't just wash your hands. How come that, that false sense of, let's say, confidence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I think it's an uneducated buyer. There is definitely elements that, AWS and the shared responsibility model, they take on as a security. They're saying, hey, our facilities are going to be protected. Our hypervisor is going to be protected. Your core EC2 instances at the root, from an infrastructure their perspective, but what goes on inside the OS and the patching and the care and feeding, that has never been in their vocabulary. I think it was an assumption that people made. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's we're here, and I've heard it many times when I was working at AWS and when I wasn't working at AWS. They thought it was going to be the easy button for all those things, and that's again just reality of the technology, really coming to light that I think we're seeing, and missed expectation from the enterprise. And how do you get that missed expectation? Unfortunately, people had to learn the hard way that all of a sudden things weren't secure. Now, AWS has done a fantastic job at making sure and helping customers. If they have a public S3 bucket or something like that, I think you have to click through 5 warnings before, are you sure you really want to do this? And then they have tools that they can go and make sure that, hey, anything that was made public, make sure that it actually should be public. So I think there is a lot of positive security things that the hyperscalers brought that now are just becoming the norm. But yeah, there is no, nirvana magic bullet kind of tech out there in the public cloud that people are getting. And I think that's part of the realization and why maybe some people are repatriating as well.
Yeah. So one of the other expectations is, people want to wash their hands, right? If you own, you got to own it. You got to fix it. You got to do everything. Why don't you just outsource the mess, right? So when you move to public cloud, you could say, hey, I want to simplify my ops. I want to improve my SLAs. Then I don't have to have those teams of people around doing things, right? But then the question is, if you look at cloud users, they still have ops teams to manage, their fleet of VMs. They still have, people managing their security in Amazon. They need people to, even DBAs to look after the RDS instances. So that's kind of a, first of all, you're kind of getting rid of people because you think you're going to go somewhere else and you're going to outsource the problem, but you still have all these people that you need to bring in a way to make it work. And those people need to understand, right, that architecture. So you still have these ops teams, these SREs and all that stuff. So what's the status there? What do you see? I mean, are SLAs being met, or is it so that, maybe it's easier if it's all on-prem, because, we, as an industry, many enterprises, they have a long history of, doing that, and they have that, let's say, internalized, knowledge internally, right?
No, I mean, it's been a good decade, so I think we've made progress and a lot more people understanding public cloud. But in the beginning, I mean, that was a real problem. Operations in the enterprise was way different than operations in the public cloud, but we've made that gap. But I think it was really hard for a lot of people because they were sitting there and doing all the firefighting in the enterprise applications that they had, and then trying to firefight in the public cloud and not understanding it and knowing it's a completely different model. When I first started getting into AWS and Azure, I really was thankful that I had a development background, because writing infrastructure as code as just a traditional, enterprise IT guy would have been a challenge for me if I didn't understand that. It was a lot more code-like and more development, like than it was anything that I've done in tweaking and tuning knobs of, the days of running, IT servers all over the place. And I think that balance is starting to shift a little bit. And we have a lot of, newer, younger people in the market now that grew up in cloud, where, a decade ago, that just wasn't the case. And so I'm not sure that the operations side is as big as a gap that's driving the repatriation, because I think we've kind of tightened that out, a lot. I mean, there's so many just people that are certified in cloud anymore. And I think we're even starting to move the enterprise to more of a DevOps and an SRE model, which makes a lot more sense, because if you think about it, I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't have the applications that needed to run 24/7 as much as we do today. Like right now, that's a norm. I mean, my kids will never understand the concept that something only was supposed to happen at a certain time. We were on a trip a few months ago, or for a few weeks ago, and my son was like, "No, I want to watch this." It's like, no, you have to watch what's on TV. And so think about that concept and that mindset of like having to wait for something. That's kind of been forced out of us now in an enterprise and in a hyperscale. So it's just the norm. You have to be running 24/7. There is no such thing as downtime anymore, or a scheduled, change or an outage. So I think we've tightened up on that. I don't know that that's the big thing that's pushing repatriation, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, talking about linear TV versus streaming, I think, the younger generation, I think that's a difficult thing to understand.
Yeah,
how it was before and how it is now.
And we were like that. I mean, think about it. 20 some years ago, if a website was down, you just came back later. But like that concept for this younger generation is just not there. They just want it now. And so every application has to be run like a hyperscale application, essentially.
Yeah. When we started off, when I started off in the database industry, that was back in the Ericsson days, big telco. And there they had 5 nines. There, you needed to have dial tone, all the time, right? Because even like these 911 services depended on it, right? But and at that time, I remember selling databases outside of telecoms. You would have like, downtime. Downtime, we mean that's unplanned downtime, because we have planned downtime, right? You have 4 hours every month where you actually upgrade stuff. But nowadays, you're expected to upgrade stuff while things are running in production. So, yeah. But So coming back a little bit, looking at all the issues we just discussed, perhaps the TCO, considerations, they are perhaps the most glaring, because so comparing an on-prem hybrid CapEx kind of, model versus a cloud OpEx model, when does one make sense over the other?
I heard an analyst say this phrase, I don't know, it was probably a good 6 years ago, that public cloud is perfect. If you're going, the analogy, I'm butchering it already, but the analogy of getting a dog, receiving a dog, you want to train your dog in the public cloud, because if it makes a mess, you can throw it away and it's good to go. But once you get to your steady state and the dog's not a puppy anymore and it's a good boy, it's better to run it in the private cloud. And to take that analogy to like a company like Dropbox, who was very famous in saying this, and then 37 Signals was out there talking about this as well, is that they you can do some training in the public cloud, but at the end of the day, it's better for your business to capitalize it, own the hardware, own the full stack, own the update cycle, kind of own everything. And I don't think that that's the, again, nirvana that we're all looking for, but I think it's just a balance in between the two. And that's why I've been bullish of the concept multi-cloud for, pretty much my life, is that, you got to pick the right tool that's going to, go and run your business. And do it efficiently and secure, with the top security, and your consumers, both your customers as well as then the people internally, need to be happy with it. And so you look at like big storage right now. If you know that you're going to run a petabyte of storage, it's going to be, and you're going to run that petabyte for the next 5 years, it's going to be better for your business to capitalize that and go and put it in your data center or a shared data center or something like that. And, that makes sense. If you're going to go and run an application that's going to be heavy burstable, and it's all built on microservices, and so you can have scaling engines and everything behind it, it's probably better fit inside of the public cloud until you figure out exactly what you need from a steady state standpoint. And I think that's a lot of the work that we're trying to help our customers go through right now, is help them figure out which cloud is actually the best for their application. And that's a story that everybody should be thinking about. And they should be doing ROI and TCO analysis. But if you're going to, the general rule of thumb, if you're going to keep something for a few years, you probably want to figure out how to reduce that expense and then, put it into more of a steady state environment and go. But if you're going to burst, I've worked with a lot of customers over the years that, had to deal with Black Friday or deal with back to school shopping, big advertisements that would come out that would just push a ton of traffic. Perfect for the public cloud. And as you look at like AI, I think that's the one that's kind of busting everybody up right now. It's like, oh, what do I do? Should I go to a public cloud environment? Should I go and build my own? It's probably a combination of both. Go figure out and test the different models that are out there and the different tools that are out there. Keep your data private, run some sort of scripted data out there in the public cloud. But then when you figure out how to, actually, own it and what you need, then use it on your private cloud data. That's probably the best of both worlds. Make sure you have the security protection, because I think there's a lot of unknowns out there right now. And, as people start to think about latency in the future, I think that's going to be a big challenge that people are going to have, that you're going to probably want to have, maybe AI close to where your data is actually being generated if you're a manufacturing or a healthcare company like that. So you're going to have to go, all these different things are going to be thrown at you as an IT leader. And so if you're not doing the ROI and TCO analysis right now, I think you're going to run into the same issues that we saw with public cloud 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and how, in a way, how is on-prem or hybrid more cost predictable?
I think it's only cost predictable if your workload's predictable. If your workload's predictable and you know that, hey, I'm going to grow this data set at X percentage year over year, then you can go and if you have cash, you can go and buy the hardware devices you need to run that application. If you have no idea what's going to happen, and you're not sure, you move to public cloud. But the problem with that, what happens there is, just like it's unpredictable, just like anything unpredictable, is your expense could get out of control. And that's like one thing you can't really walk back. And if you have users just consuming whatever, but you don't have the money to pay for it, that could be a challenge for them. So sometimes putting people in a box and saying, hey, we bought X amount of hardware, we have X amount of storage, this is what you get to play with, and that's it. I mean, that might help some customers get rid of that unpredictability that could blow out their budget in 1 month.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's I guess convenience is what public cloud is famous for. But definitely, it's like giving a credit card to all your employees in a way. And
yeah,
people,
it's like giving my kids a credit card at the concession stand. Like they'll go nuts. I mean, they'll buy every ice cream and popcorn and nachos that they can see. But if I go and say, hey, look, these are your nachos and that's it, they'll be happy with it and they'll make do. But I think that's the balance you have to strike, because you don't want to get shadow IT going again, which has people, swiping the credit card and expensing it because they're frustrated. There's just something in the middle. And, back to your point of is the pendulum shifting? I think, yeah, it might be, because I think we went too far public cloud and we're really need to end up in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. So beyond dollars and cents, right? What value can enterprises, realize in running their own infra? I mean, are we talking, reduced latency, better performance for data-heavy workloads? I think AI. I think you mentioned something earlier about maybe bringing AI to where your data is.
I think all those are definitely really big topics that I'm talking about right now. The latency is probably one of the largest. So US Signal, just kind of give a background on us. We provide fiber, data centers, and then one step adjacencies like cloud and security and those types of things. And so we are working heavy right now. We have about 700 miles of fiber being built right now. And a lot of that has to do with making sure that we are ready for inference, which is going to be focused heavy on latency. And if you think about it, I mean, when the internet was created, I mean, we were really, and again, we talked, just about availability, but as users, I mean, we deal with 100 and 200 milliseconds of latency, no issues. But when you get machines talking to each other, they don't want to wait. They want to make a decision and move. And if you look at some of the automation happening, especially in the manufacturing space or logistics spaces, like you have to have access to that data. You have to have insights coming from that data real time. You can't take that application and move it into a public cloud and say, hey, you got 20 milliseconds of round trip latency to deal with. The machines aren't going to want to deal with it. It's going to compound and create issues for us, maybe even safety issues for us in the future. And that's where I think we're going to see a new renaissance of private cloud occurring, just because of the latency applications that you're going to need when you start moving everything into more of this inference stage of AI that we're heading to over the next few years.
Good. Yeah. So now let's look a little bit at, let's say some of the challenges, right, when it comes to doing the repatriation. I mean, even if there is a strong, motivation, let's say to repatriate some of your workloads. I mean, some companies, they aren't ready for the day-to-day tasks of running on-prem, right? How do you help bridge that gap?
Well, I don't know that everything has to be on-prem. And I again, as technologists, I think we always create these divides of it has to be either or. I think, one of the services we offer is co-location. And so a customer can come in, use our data center for the power, the cooling, and the internet, and it's close to where they want it to be, and they can capitalize their hardware, or they could lease their hardware from us, or they could, buy it in a hosted service. I think there's all that intermediary that happens in between. So if you have public cloud over here and you have on-prem, customer owns the data center, you have private cloud people like US Signal that are infrastructure providers that are kind of sitting in the middle. And as an IT organization, you should be thinking about how you're doing all three. Because there is some still stuff that you want to keep on-prem or you want to own. I mean, we still see a lot of phone systems out there in the wild that people are running that are on-prem, and they need to be close to their consumers. And so that works. And then you still have your on-prem where you need to have virtual servers to be there for development or whatever you're doing. And so that makes sense. And then this private cloud infrastructure provider like US Signal, I mean, we sit in the middle to kind of provide the best of both worlds. And then you have your public cloud providers out there. And you should be thinking about multi. You should be thinking about hybrid. One of the strategies we launched last year was a term called operations anywhere. And it's a strategy for us to say as a provider of services that we will provide ubiquitous service no matter what the infrastructure is. So if you want to buy, backups or data recovery or data protection or disaster recovery from US Signal, you can do that on-prem. You can do that inside of our four walls, obviously, and you can do that in the public cloud. And I think that's what a lot of people need to adopt as their strategy is that, hey, we need to then make sure that we're using the correct infrastructure, the correct location, and then we'll run our applications ubiquitous no matter, where it lives.
Right. Do you see any, common practical hurdles that organizations face, right, when moving, workloads into like a multi-cloud or a, hybrid model?
I think it's going to add some more complexity to it. And you're always going to have people that, they're going to be zealots. They're going to say, no, this is the best way to do it. And then you're going to get, a group of people that are just like, I'm good with anything. And so you're going to have those battles of fiefdoms inside of an organization. And I think, the sooner you can build, one of the things I built at AWS was like Cloud Center of Excellence, which is getting basically everybody to agree on how you should adopt cloud. That was the big value that I saw out of it. So as soon as a CIO or CTO or whoever's kind of leading the charge could help build that and get people to be more open, I think that's gonna help everybody. And I think when you can pair it together with the CFO conversation as far as making sure that we're keeping our finances tight, so where it allows us to innovate, and the CEO conversation or this chief strategy operations, chief strategy conversation that says, hey, we need to do better for our customers. When you can bring all those people into the mix to kind of have their say, you're going to get to more of a flexible, more pliable technology person, which is maybe an oxymoron, but something that I think people need to do to have success in the future.
Yeah. So one more concern is, when you see all these, Amazon or, Google Cloud conferences, they just added 20 more services or 30 more services, managed, automated, how do organizations overcome that, right? Because when you go to like a large hyperscaler, you have this menu of, all these services you could use. And then when you consider, something else, it's quite hard because then it means you probably have to do a lot of this, yourself.
Yeah, it's always the conversation of, do you want to buy into an ecosystem? If you want to buy into an ecosystem completely and you're generating a new application and it makes sense for you to use more serverless style applications, it's a great thing to do it. But just like you said, you got to have somebody or multiple people full time just understanding what's being released and how you can use it. I think, whether it's a good secret or not, most of AWS, I would say, most AWS users are using EC2 and that's it. Yeah, you have some people dabbling in EKS or ECS or Beanstalk, but that's like the 20 or 30% of the spend that's occurring. Most everything else is still EC2 instances underneath the covers. And that's the easy button. And so I think there's going to be some right sizing of all of those services eventually. And I think that's going to happen because I'm not sure AWS and Azure and GCP and everybody, they even know what services they need. I think they build some things a lot of times that come out because they're using them internally, whether it's Microsoft building something for O365 or LinkedIn or, some of their bigger customers, and same with AWS. And then you see GCP, actually GCP probably is the best lifecycle management of all of these services that come out that, they get knocked on all the time. But yeah, they release a product and they have very little uptick. It's like, why should they go and spend all this money on R&D and operations and management? Let's just kill it and move on. And I think, we've seen a lot of that happen. And I think that's where, we just have to have a maturity in the market still. But it's crazy to think how time flies. I mean, again, hyperscale, we want to put a label on it 2012. I mean, we're 13 years into this cycle. Think about end user computing. I mean, end user computing, we're in 30, 40 years of running end user computing. And it's still, the wild, wild west. And so we're still very early innings in cloud and in AI and all these other things that, a typical life cycle, we just haven't seen it happen yet. And I do expect there to be a lot of right sizing in the public cloud with all these other, periphery services that are going on. At the core, most customers just need to run a virtual machine today, or they're going to build something off of a virtual machine stack. And that's really what they're doing really well already. People just need to understand that, hey, that's okay, that I'm just running virtual machines.
Yeah. You mentioned AI, a topic that you can't really get from. We're in the midst of of this AI boom, right? So many of these workloads, they need specialized hardware, right? Like GPUs. How does that factor into this, let's say repatriation decision?
I think if I had those answers, I have some ideas. I'll give you my ideas. But if I had all the definite answers, I think I'd be a pretty rich guy, because I would know what stocks to buy and who to back. My ideas and concepts on this are very similar to like public cloud in the early days. Like you got to go and play, and once you play, then you go and you build your permanent structure, your foundation. And so I think people right now are definitely all in on creating LLMs to help them answer questions. And it's crazy. Think about search engines. We had search engines forever, and Google was the key search engine forever. But I'm finding I'm asking questions and looking for resources out of my LLMs more than I am a search engine now. But then you can see how they have it interacting together. When you do a Google search, you get also Gemini responses because it was a disruptor. And I think we're going to see that over and over and over again. I do believe that companies are taking more precautions this time, and they're starting to buy more hardware to then make sure that they don't lose control of what AI can provide them. Now, I think, we're going to get some disruption in the processing space. Obviously, that's going to be, that's always going to continue to happen. The whole, DeepSeek thing, whether, what side of the fence you're on, whether you believe or not the numbers. What did happen is there was models that were trained off of other models. And I think that's going to continue to occur. You get the snowball rolling down the hill. You don't keep throwing new snowballs out there. You build off of that single snowball. And I think that's going to be, where we focus, a lot of efforts as IT folks in the future, is looking at what other people build and then making it bigger and better. And if you can privatize that with specific hardware, look at all the new processor companies that are being, released right now. There's a lot of new players that are coming into to form. CoreWeave launched their IPO. You have companies like Grok, Grok, that have processors that are only available in a serviceable model. You have, small people building SLMs that can run on, my Mac, for instance. And so we're going to see that continual evolution, where people, I think now, are going to make sure that they're more secure, which is going to probably lead to a resurgence of private, which is going to make more sense for a repatriation long-term then.
Good. So let's say 5 years down the road, right? How do you see workload placement, evolving? I guess, cloud is still big. On-prem has always been big. Where do you see the balance in the next 5 years?
It's that latency. Latency is going to drive. Latency, I think, is going to drive everything. Latency is going to become the new currency for the future. Is you're going to have reduced latency to make sure that your application can give you the insights in a timely manner. And if you think about this from like a B2C basis, you as a consumer, running and asking AI for an insight at your house, if it starts to wait for, seconds or minutes, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to move on. And so you're going to have whatever AI tool be local to where you're actually located. So hanging off of fiber that's maybe coming into your house and into these small little mini data centers. And if you think about it, it's not really a new concept. If you've ever deep dived into how Netflix works, they have these distribution pops all over the world that get closer to the end consumer, so that when you click, I want to watch this video, which is going to be Drive to Survive for me soon. The new season came out. So they know that, hey, John wants to watch that, and this is local to John, and I'm going to make sure I can stream from it somewhere local. we're going to see a huge push in that. Where Netflix has all these mini data centers all over the world, every application, every big CDN is going to follow suit. And so we're going to see distributed data centers occurring at a pretty rapid rate. And I think that's where you're seeing the hyperscalers build all these new data centers. But if you think about it, I mean, like AWS, I mean, they had a few different regions inside of the United States, and now they're talking about building data centers more places. And that's just going to be a huge drive for us in the future. So whether you call that private or whether you call that, local, that's going to be a big push for us. And that's going to be, just, I think the number one things that drives applications to be in a multi or hybrid state is because you can't just live in one single ecosystem anymore.
Yeah. So I take a note here. Physics, speed of lights, that's going to be
you can't change it. You can't beat physics. We've tried a million times, but at the end of the day, I mean, that speed of light is there.
Yeah. All right. Well, time to wrap up. So John, this has been an enlightening discussion on repatriation, right? From the reasons, driving it to the blockers and the solutions. We've spoken about TCO. We've spoken about AI's influence. So thank you for joining us. And that's it for today, folks. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having me.